Hey, good day, everybody. Thanks for stopping by Roots and Reason. Just going to do a quick live cast, do some news stuff, a little bit lighter in subject matter and stuff, and then maybe if we get some folks show up in chat, we'll have a little chat about a few things. But anyway, I'm glad you're here. Be sure to like and subscribe. Sure, buy us a coffee if you feel like it. Always looking to pay the bills. Okay, let's go take a look at a couple things. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on in the news. Let's see what we got here. Well, we'll start with Twitter first. Okay, what's going on in the Twitter sphere? Okay. Let's see what we've got going on today. Content, we are live. Okay. Okay, starting out in news today. In case you're one of those folks who've been living under a rock, uh, there's some interesting stuff that's going on with Glenn Greenwald. He's a bit of a well known, I would even go so far as to say famous, uh, very liberal left wing. I think he was even an attorney for the ACLU at one time, but he's real outspoken against what's going on in Ukraine and Gaza and with Iran. He's very anti-war. He's Jewish, he's gay, and apparently he's right over target because let's see here. Go ahead and move this one over. Um, he was on Tucker Carlson the other day, and just kind of give you an idea of, let's see what we got here. There we go. Sorry about that. And okay. So you can kind of see some of the content. CNN finally admits Joe Biden is in cognitive decline. We kind of laugh about that because most of us have known this for 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, it was one of those things that, the media would tell you, don't believe your lying eyes, Ben. It's just everybody's had a grandpa or crazy old uncle. Uh, we know what someone that's losing their faculties is just old. You just the gait at which they walk, the forgetfulness, all the signs were there. And which, by the way, is another subject of Jake Tapper I want to get into. But holy cow, CNN is now coming out there talking about it. It's like, oh, they finally admit it. This is why nobody watches CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. That's why legacy corporate media is just in such bad shape. It's just in such horrible decline. It's hilarious. Uh, if they told you that the grass is green, the sky is blue, I'd go outside and double check. But anyway, they get into a discussion, how corporate media rewrites history. This is one aspect that Democrats have always had an advantage. The media's, I won't say traditionally been on the left. I'll say it's been on the left since probably the 70s. Since it became more and more of a academic high chair, there was a lot of crossover between, we'll say, NGOs and, well, we know from the USAID stuff that A lot of more independent outlets are certainly starved for funding. So Democrats kind of always had an advantage of that. And if you go back and even listen to someone like Noam Chomsky, I mean, there's someone, that's a monster on the left in liberal circles, had the whole thing, manufacturing consent. And Glenn Greenwald's talked, he comes from that kind of same cut of old school liberal and talks a lot about that. How is it that old legacy media kind of shaped the narratives, and they had a monopoly on basically what gets heard. It was one way. When it was just news, CBS, NBC, CNN, and all these, they put it out there and you consumed it on your television. But with the advent of the internet, obviously, we've got a new form of media. And it's a lot of it's back and forth. It's two-way. It's long form. You can actually have discussions on it. And in fact, they got into a really interesting discussion I wasn't aware of, but we'll get into that in a second. But they go through the usual stuff: political tribalism destroying society, why the establishment hates Trump, why Trump's opinion on NATO changed Tucker's worldview. That was actually an interesting one. Who really hacked the DNC? Uh, and this is where it started getting really interesting. At 3725, was Jeffrey Epstein working for foreign intelligence? We all know we're talking, let's read between the lines here, Poke. He's talking about Mossad. Mossad, I mean, I think their motto is by way of deception, thou shalt do war, or something of that nature. They're known for one of the best people up there with MI6 in the United States when it comes to using honeypots, compromising leaders and significant people in society and then leveraging them. There's a lot of crossover, believe it or not, with this whole Diddy thing going on. Ugh, I shudder the thought of it. I touched a little bit on the JFK thing, so you can see we're getting into some pretty weighty stuff, and he's talking about why the media is promoting war and stuff. But really, I think the big one here was a lot of the stuff on Epstein, foreign intelligence, um, getting ready for war, the whole bit going on in Gaza. A lot of it's Israel. Now, Glenn Greenwald's Jewish and gay, and he's able to get away with saying things that most of us couldn't without getting some kind of horrible label slapped on us. Some and ism or whatever. You know how that goes. But anyway, it was literally like a day after this interview. Now, keep in mind, don't care what you think of Tucker. You celebrate the guy; he's your hero. You can't say his name without spitting on the ground 3 times. Whatever flips your switch, man. But one thing that he is insanely popular. I think more people tune into a Tucker show than probably all 3 media cable outlets combined. So all of a sudden, I pop in one day, and lo and behold, uh, because I follow Glenn on Twitter, um, get this next little bit that popped up here. And I'll read it to you if it's a little bit difficult to see. Last night, videos released online depicting behavior in my private life. Some were distorted, others were not. They were published without my knowledge and consent, and it was a publication, therefore criminal. Though we do not know exactly who is responsible, we are close to knowing, and the motive was malicious and political one. As for the content of the videos, I have no embarrassment or regret about them. The videos depict consenting adults engaged in intimate actions in their private lives. They all display fully consensual behavior, harming nobody. Obviously, it can be uncomfortable and unpleasant when your private behavior is made public against your will. That's why this behavior is private in the first place. The only wrongdoing here is the criminal and malicious publication of the videos and the attempt to malign and perceive political enemies and advance a political agenda. Others are, of course, free to form their own judgments, as some are prone to do, about others' private lives. It won't change my work. I will continue all my many prongs of journalism and will pursue the causes most important to me exactly as before. So, yeah, I've seen the picture. I refuse to watch the video. From what I gather, he's dressed up in a little skirt and some kind of a girly outfit or something of this nature. And I ain't gonna lie, it's kind of creepy. It is, and it's like, whatever the guy does in his private life, I, I I go through and let's just take a look at some of the comments that I'm going through, and there's like some people just going out there saying just really horrible shit, and of course you'd expect them to, because certain people smell blood and water. Then there's people who are from the really far right, the religious types, and they're like, well, what about his kids? I'm like, well, from what I've seen in any of the few pictures that I've seen, there aren't any kids in the picture, and I don't think they're around the house. But consenting adults, a man and a woman, they don't exactly have sex on the kitchen floor where the kids are watching cartoons. It's not normal. And maybe it does happen, but again, I just don't care what people do in their private lives consensual. Yeah, there's a bit of an ick factor for me, but whatever. You know, I'll get worried about it if he's paying my rent. I'll get concerned. But he does in his private. I respect the man for the damn journalism he's doing, and the fact that they went so far on Glenn Greenwald. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Look what they did to Julian Assange. What about Edward Snowden? Um, Anytime journalists get too close to stuff that's of any serious consequence, it's almost inevitable that this kind of crap comes out. It just does. So this has got Twitter all abuzz today. Absolutely, everybody's going absolutely ape shit over it. Oops, sorry about that. And I forgot to share this. The Tucker Carlson, I like when folks kind of break down the chapters on it. I watch this. If you're interested in any kind of foreign policy stuff, it's worth the watch. It was. It was actually pretty good. Anyway, moving right along. That's kind of the big Twitter news, I guess, that's going on at the moment. Everybody's in a twist. Okay. And let's see. And also, I need to make sure I know exactly how to get to chat. Okay. Go ahead and update that. The folks who get to comment must be a subscriber for at least 5 minutes. Okay, what do we got here? All right. Okay, moving right along. And next up, just to keep a little bit of levity here. Let me make sure I got the right channel up. And share this tab. I've mentioned in podcasts before, I think maybe even one that I was chatting with Holland about, that I found pretty interesting, was somehow the youth today seem a little bit more fragile. Anyway, I'll just let the video kind of speak for itself. Let me make sure I got the right one pulled up here. Transition over to that. Okay, and I will be quiet.
You have your phone in there, I assume? And then you have like a wall or
Hang on just one moment. We have Audio going to the wrong place here. Change that. And headphones.
Or something.
There we go. Yeah, let me make sure that we can see this. All right. Should be big enough to actually see. Okay. If it's a little bit difficult to kind of read anyway, young lady, she's 21 years old. She gets pulled over. She was clamoring for her vape, her phone, and her wallet. Of course she would be, you know. But when the reality of getting arrested for a DUI starts to sink in, let me make sure that this is turned down a little bit because it was really loud. Let's take a watch.
So vape, phone, and wallet. Is that all you need? All right. Take that from me. All right.
Alrighty then. As we can see, young lady just literally went into an absolute shit show of a meltdown. And I get it. Look, getting arrested, I've been there. Yeah, it can be kind of traumatic, but at the same time, you're driving drunk for God's sakes, you know? Perfectly fine. Give her what she wants, but then I think it starts to settle in and literally, I want my mommy. 21 years old. I don't know. Maybe some of you folks are parents out there. You can tell me. Is this literally where kids are at today? Just like the other kid that was, 18, 19, has a mental breakdown in the back of a Starbucks because he's asked to work a full 8-hour shift. God forbid. But anyway, enough fun about that. Real quick, I want to chat a little bit about. I've caught a lot of hell over. Good grief. This started, I want to say 2022. Time certainly is moving pretty quick. Told a buddy of mine that Russia's going to win this war. And I was with a bunch of group of guys in kind of a local fun chat thing of our in a Discord. And man, holy shit, people came at me just left and right. I mean, I even had friends come at me just, oh, you Putin apology, all the usual nonsensical stuff. And I'm like, look, I don't care. I'm not like I don't care that Putin wins or loses or whatever, but it's the point is they're gonna win. It's just really quite that simple. It's not a matter of what I want. It's not a matter of what I think. Let me see if I can adjust this screen a little bit. It's just a mathematical thing. Let's go ahead and make that screen a good bit bigger here. There we go. Maybe it's a little bit easier to see. When we consider that Ukraine's already in bad shape as it is, go back and listen to the recording from Victoria Nuland. She helped orchestrate the whole coup that took place in 2014. The United States had a hand in it. I'm not making this shit up. It's everywhere on the news if you just want to go Google the damn thing. But you could say that we were interfering in Ukrainian elections. Imagine that, huh? Let me go ahead and transition this scene over. There we go. How about that? A little bit better. Well, 2022, when the special military operation started taking place and Russia officially invaded Ukraine as a whole, I went out and said, look, this isn't a matter of like what I want or what I think. This is just it's just the facts, Jack, man. You look at the size of Russia, look at their manufacturing ability. Is it going to hurt them? Of course it is, man. I mean, they've lost something like 50,000 soldiers in this war so far. They're taking it on the chin, but I think some of the current estimates that I've read, anywhere from the New York Times, AP, even like Rand Corporation, which is one of the folks that do a lot of this stuff on our end, right now, Russia's firing 12 shells for every one shell that Ukraine is able to fire back. So they're they're in a tough spot. They're getting their ass kicked, and it's starting to steamroll now. So let me go ahead and by the way, I've spoken with Alexander Mercurius, the guy here on the bottom. I've had correspondence with him. He's one of the people on the Duran. The guy up in the top right is Glenn Deason. I believe he's Norwegian. He does a channel, I think it's either Glenn Deason or Neutrality Studies. I can't remember which. And then, of course, the guy on the top left, you might have noticed the book behind me on one of my shelves back there is The Israeli Lobby. And that's John Mearsheimer. He co wrote a book with Stephen Walt, very controversial back in like '08 or something like that. But anyway, let's go ahead and hear just a quick couple of minutes of what probably one of the preeminent geopolitical analyst in the world has to say about this.
I agree with Alexander that it's hard to see how this could possibly lead to some sort of meaningful peace settlement. And of course, the West doesn't want a peace settlement right away. What it wants is a ceasefire. And the Russians have made it unequivocally clear, God knows how many times, that that's unacceptable. But we continue to push for it, and it's not going to happen. So the question that raises in my mind is, what's going on here? I mean, what is the purpose of all this? And I actually think in the West, the people who are in favor of continuing this war
It's time for you to get your reading superpowered. So stop straining your eyes and start listening instead.
I had to do a lot of
are using these negotiations to their advantage.
What a pain
And I
in
think
the
in a
ass.
very important way, Trump has fallen into the trap, because what happens here is we constantly call for a ceasefire, which seems intuitively plausible or reasonable to the average person. And then when the Russians don't agree, we blast the Russians for being unreasonable. And of course, we also have to face the fact that there's a war taking place. At the same time, we're attempting to start negotiations. So that allows people in the West to say the Russians continue to fight when we are interested in trying to shut this war down. We're pushing for a ceasefire. We want to talk. And look at what the Russians are doing. Firing missiles at the Ukrainians and continuing to attack on the Eastern Front. This is unreasonable. So Trump is getting into this situation where he, I think, feels compelled to get tougher and tougher with the Russians. And this, of course, just makes the situation worse, and it prolongs the war. So my point would be that the negotiations, as Alexander says, are going to lead nowhere in terms of getting a peace deal. And indeed, if anything, the fact that these things continue uh, pushes in the other direction and makes sure we'll never get a peace deal, because the Russians are made to look unreasonable. And Trump is put in a position where he has to play tough with the Russians, which makes it impossible to get a deal.
Okay. So, yeah, this is one of the criticisms I've had of the Trump administration. Um, he might be a business guy, but geopolitics and realpolitik is something completely different. And when I look at some of the team he's assembled around him, I mean, I'm not I'm not impressed by Pete Hegseth, and if anybody, maybe Tulsi Gabbard would kind of step up. I think she's a level of intelligence up there a little bit further. Hey, we finally got someone in chat. Hey, thank you. Thank you for stopping by. Cool. At least I know chat is actually working. Cool. So, okay, so I'm not real pleased with kind of Trump on this thing. And let me go to my next screen real quick because check this out. Now, I'm glad that these folks are agreeing with me. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to pat myself on the back for this one because I called this shit 3 years ago. I just like, look, so I'm going to take you to this really interesting map, and this is called Live UA Map. Okay. It might be a little bit difficult to see. Let me get it transitioned over. Okay. Um, this is a map of Ukraine. Here's like Moldova and the disputed region up here, which is primarily Russian. If you look at an actual demographic map of Russian speaking people in Ukraine, I mean, it was always part of Russia. As an independent country, it's only been, I think, independent since like 91. Anyway, I'm not going to get into I don't really give a shit about the history in depth and who's right and who's wrong. Out here in Western Ukraine, if you look at prior to 2022, even after 2014, there's a lot of talks in places. AP, New York Times, New York Post, Washington Post. They talk about places like the Azov Battalion, the far right. They're Nazis. They've got the swastikas, they got the old German hats, and okay, now after 2022, they've kind of been downplaying this whole thing because now Russia's the bad guy again. It's like, yeah, okay, we don't like Nazis, but we hate Russians more, and Putin's the bad guy. Now, I just want to kind of point out here, let me zoom in a little bit. All this red here, this is what Russia has annexed since the war, actual territory. Now, part of this, it's a little bit hard to see in here, but some of this land right here, these are the places that signed a referendum to join Russia or become independent protectorates or whatever their referendum was. There was 4. And the other area is down here in Odessa. And we had this whole thing, the Istanbul, which is just down the creek down here a little bit. There's Istanbul. And the Istanbul Accords were okay, they came to the table. Ukraine was ready to sign this thing before the war really got going on very hard. And then Boris Johnson, I don't know what the hell is up with the Brits, man. He flies out of London, he goes down to Istanbul. They've already, the first guy signed the documents to end the war, literally as it was starting. He's like, no, don't do it, man. The West, we'll come out there, man. We'll back you. We'll arm you. You can go kick them Ruskies' ass. The United States has wanted to give Russia's black eye. We've, for years called Russia basically a gas station on a way to China, which was important. We just, our mindset in our government still treats Russia as though it's 1994, 92, and nothing can be further from the truth. And anyway, I'll certainly put a link to this because you can go to any one of these things, and when you look, it'll break it down. Now, keep in mind, this is a pro-Ukrainian map. This is not a pro-Russian map. It's pro-Ukrainian. And each one of these things are basically Russian pushing in to Ukraine, and it's picking up speed. They're in bad shape right now, and things are really accelerating there. It's a damn shame. I make no dispersions of the fact that I am extremely an anti-war person. I detest violence, and just something about war to me just doesn't make sense. Why can't we be doing business, man? Trade them some minerals and wood and wheat. let's make some money, buy some stocks. Everybody could benefit from these things. War just seems to always gravitate to just that small handful of people. And meanwhile, it costs regular schleps and working class people and peasants, the low rungs of society. They're the ones that bleed out on the battlefield every time. Doesn't matter. Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, on and on and on. It's always the same. And it's a damn shame. I just wanted to get it clear to folks. Ukraine's losing this thing bad. We recently had all these attacks in Moscow, this massive drone swarm. This is the last ditch of people who are desperate. When you consider for 3 years, the Russians have been pounding the Ukrainians. They've got conscription. They drive around the streets, load these people, kidnap them off the streets, throw them into a van, put a gun in their hand, give them a clip of ammo, and they send them to be cannon fodder out on the line. That's where Ukraine's at. Meanwhile, Russia's defense industries have picked up. We can't even compete. The United States cannot even compete. The United States and Europe together cannot produce enough shells to feed the Ukrainian war effort. It's just impossible. And it's really hollowed out kind of a lot of this idea that NATO is this big bad thing anymore. A lot of people are going, well, maybe the Russians weren't a bunch of pussies after all. Again, you don't have to like this. Personally, you should be offended. War is disgusting. There could be peace here. And basically, all that Russians demands, and they've said this multiple times, Ukraine must remain neutral. That's it. And by the way, they're losing this territory. From the Russians' point of view, it's like, look, we've lost 50, 60,000 people. You ain't getting this shit back, man. We've taken it back. It's mostly Russian-speaking people who identified with Russians anyway. So, but anyway. So that's kind of where we're at in the Ukraine war. Keep an eye on it. Things are starting to really progress fast. And, if you hate war, write your congressman, say something about it, because it's disgusting. We shouldn't be funding any of this. To be quite frank, it's none of our business. We shouldn't have gotten involved in the first place. I mean, if this was Mexico, how would the United States feel if the Russians were funding Mexico to go to war with us? We wouldn't take too kindly to that. Maybe you can come up with a different metaphor or something, but anyway. So that's all I wanted to say about that. And hey, Stefan, I'm glad you made it. Thanks for chiming in. Now, next one of things here is, I know I'm picking a little bit on Republicans a little bit today. Hang on a minute here. Kill this over here. And trust me, don't you worry. If you're a liberal or you're a Democrat out there, your turn's coming up soon. As we've all recently heard, the big, beautiful bill, right? Here, Trump, typical Trump bullshit. Oh, it's the best bill. It's the biggest bill. It's the biggest bill ever, yeah, I don't do Trump bills. But you can kind of see where this is going at. So when I pull up to check the math on this, now don't get me wrong. Factcheck.org, even using the government accounting office and stuff, they use shady accounting practices. It doesn't matter if it's left and right. It's one of the few less partisan places of our government. Now, here's why this pisses me off. In the same way that the Democrats were covering for Joe Biden's obvious dementia and his inability to function as a human being, let alone a president, the whole issues with auto pens and all that other bullshit. My whole life, the thing about Republicans, they were the party of business, the party of wealthy people. They were the smart people when it came to money, I'm using very kind of glib and, part of my early naivety to this, but let's face it, the Republicans have always kind of run as fiscal conservative. You always hear that shit get tossed out there. Well, take a look at this bill. Doesn't look like it's very fiscally conservative. In fact, it looks like not much different than Biden's. Yeah, we're doing some tax cuts, and we're adding to the defunding the illegal aliens and stuff like this, ICE and border security and stuff. So the problem is the bill's going to cost between 4 to 5 trillion over 10 years. See, that's fine if you can do tax cuts without cutting spending. You're robbing from me and you, and you got to be able to cut the spending, because if you cut the income, hello. No, the Republican, kind of argument to this is, well, if we cut taxes in the right place, it will spur growth. And it's out of jobs, improve job creation and easier finance. People spend more. Okay, there's a reasonable, valid argument to be made for that. But the problem with that stuff is it's so hard to track, and it takes a long time, years. And I just can't help but look when I see, wait a minute, we're spending more money than we did under Biden. Um, that's kind of a problem, You guys poke fun of Biden, you gave the guy shit for the Democrats spending too much money. Then you get supposedly fiscally conservative people in there and they say, not only are we going to spend more, we're going to tax less. Well, someone's got to pay that. They're kicking the can down to the road to people's kids in the future, including their own. It's disgusting. It really pisses me off. So, where is the economy these days? Well, one of the places I wanted to look, housing market. I believe this one was from Redfin, right, where I pulled this one up. Housing market has 500,000 more sellers than buyers, the most on record, more than 2008. This will likely cause home prices to fall. No shit, you think? And the thing is, builders are still out there building it. I don't get it. Um, but holy shit, yeah, we've got a problem. I mean, I don't know how many of you people remember 2008, but it wasn't until about 2009, 2010 when it really started to hurt. That's when the money kind of kicked in and the money pinch hit everybody. It was a bitch. And it took years for it to get better. Quite a few years. And I'm kind of just looking over the housing market. Let's go ahead and check AP. Ads everywhere. Sellers outnumber prospective buyers. High price and mortgage rates skew the housing market. That's another problem. Just watching Danielle DiMartino Booth. She's formerly with, I think, the Dallas Fed, was mentioning it's like, well, look, here's the thing. New houses are going for, they've been cut in prices to sell to that of existing equivalent houses. Well, that's kind of a worrying thing because now rents are going to start to decline. Once rent starts to decline, and this is going to hit not everywhere at once, but it's going to hit probably places like Seattle, LA, certainly the West Coast, Miami, Tampa, some of the hot spots in the South, Austin, Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville. It's going to be a real big problem because this is where most of the people have their equity, their life savings. Everything they really got is in the equity of their homes. And we're looking at possibly repeating 2008 or even worse. And it's not looking good. And I just kind of real quick wanted to go over, well, how about employment? Well, an interesting thing, again, that same DiMartino Booth was pointing out, employment dropped month over month starting in second quarter of 2024. There was a net job loss. We were technically, by some measurements, in a recession. Now that perked back up at the end of 2024 and quarter four. However, it dropped back down, and we've been basically in a net job loss the entire year of 2025. And not only are jobs getting harder to find and unemployment going up, but look at things like credit card debt, defaults on automotive loans, defaults on mortgages. This is a scary one. Um, I'll have to say, folks, and the thing is, services are getting hurt the worst. People are just going to ratchet down and they're going to buy basically just the most important needed things. They're no longer going to be eating out. They're going to be saving that for all the important stuff. Oh man, I messed up that hole. It's a little bit offset. I shouldn't have skewed my screen. Anyway, on a little bit of a lighter note, and maybe pick a little bit of fun of Democrats here. I caught an episode. I love Brett Weinstein. I think he's a very thoughtful person. Um, Michael Malice, he's anarcho-capitalist. He doesn't even believe in government, but he's an incredibly intelligent person. I can't ever take that away from him. I think he's a bit of an ass. But anyway, Brett Weinstein, really great guy, former professor up there at Evergreen University, I think in Washington, or actually maybe it was Oregon, outside of Portland. Anyway, real quick, I just want to go ahead and let's take a quick listen to this.
A little bit to politics. One of the things that I find interesting is there's been this delusion, for lack of a better term, in my opinion, and it's been promulgated very heavily in right of center circles, that the Democratic Party is on its last legs. It's a wrap. They can never win again. Something we heard about Republican Party 5 minutes ago. The Democratic Party is the oldest political party on earth. And this idea that if they have 210 seats in the House out of 435, it's a wrap, and 47 Senate seats, it seems absolutely crazy to me. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about whether you think I'm wrong or where you think it would be fairly easy for the Democrats to regain power, and what would it take?
Well, I would say I don't think you're wrong. I think your observation, Lindy effect being what it is, oldest political party is liable to live to fight another day. On the other hand, I think something absolutely unholy has taken over the Democratic Party, and that in effect, I will have an impossible time believing that the Democratic Party has completely overcome whatever evil has taken it over. I will never believe in it again. And I think a lot of people are in the same boat. So I think that this is ambiguous. I don't think it's a wrap.
Right.
I think if we were smart, we would understand that the Democratic Party has revealed itself to be compromised with what I claim is analogous to rabies, right? That party has to go. Doesn't mean it will go.
Right.
And do I expect it to go? Probably not. But, what do you do? It's like an irresistible force meeting an immovable object. I don't know what's going to win out here.
Again, I'm going to point out Eric Weinstein is, for Pete's sakes, the man is a liberal professor of biology. One of his claims to fame was an interesting thing he came up with on telomeres. In all the cells of our body, we have these little things that look like a telomere is kind of like the little plastic end on the end of your tennis shoelace. Keeps the end from getting frayed. Every cell in your body has telomeres in them. And every time the cell reproduces, the telomere gets a little shorter. And it gets to some point where it can't divide anymore and it dies. This is one of the things of the aging process in all animals. He came up with this really interesting thing that the pharmaceutical companies, they use white mice, obviously, to do a lot of drug testing and stuff. And what he found was the mice that they were using were bred for laboratories, of course. One of the problems with that is when they started looking at the telomeres on the mice, um, they were abnormally long, sometimes up to twice as long as a normal wild mouse would be. So it skews all the data for all the drug companies out there that have been using things saying, hey, it's safe and effective. It skews the evidence for a lot of drug and medical treatments and stuff because quite literally through genetic manipulation, and it may have been done intentional, maybe not, regardless, the outcome's the same. It's not directly representative to normal cells in any other normal animal out there. They are abnormally long, so they technically would probably live longer in many cases, but it's not a good apples to apple type of an animal to be able to test things like pharmaceuticals on cancer treatments, et cetera, just because it's literally the genetics of the animal are totally squared. So anyway, his brother's Eric Weinstein, famous physicist with the grand unified theory of everything kind of a thing. He's also, they're both brilliant people, but what he's talking about here with the Democratic Party is I hear this from a lot of people that would be certainly from the left that have moved not necessarily to the right. I'd say maybe closer to the middle, maybe more populist. He happens to be good friends with RFK Jr., obviously because of the medical field. But there's a whole army of people out there. There's look at Tucker Carlson went from right wing, kind of more centrist. He's kind of moved from the left. Joe Rogan, Democrat his whole life, liberal even, especially for some of the areas that he grew up in. There's a lot of people on the left. Well, look, Glenn Greenwald, for Pete's sakes. Again, a gay Jewish ACLU attorney that spends a lot of time on Tucker and interviewing people like Dan Bongino. And, it's like, holy shit. There's a lot of people on the left that truly feel like the party's kind of left them. And when we look back at some of the things that the Democratic Party have done, when I go back to like this discussion, or maybe it was the one on between Tucker and Glenn Greenwald, that Democrats didn't want to run Joe Biden. They were hoping that he wouldn't get the brand recognition and all this. They were hoping for somebody else to rise to the top. Maybe Governor Whitmer, Buttigieg, somebody else, anybody else, just not Joe. And Joe kind of started catching on. And this was very problematic because the only other person who was gaining steam was Bernie Sanders. And you go back to 2016 and you look what the Democratic Party did to Bernie Sanders. It's disgusting. And these are the people that are on television every night screaming about democracy. Okay, sure, democracy technically applies just to our government and things of this are democratic. But when you look how they run their own party, it was extremely authoritarian. You had the Clinton Obama machine out there, and they did not want Bernie Sanders anywhere near the presidency. And then they started kind of equating the Bernie bros with anti-vaxxers and stuff like this. I'm not a big Bernie fan, but at the same time, he's from New Hampshire, live free or die. He's big on Second Amendment, so I'm groovy with that. Been on the socialist side for me. But at the same time, he's been saying kind of the same stuff since like the 60s, for Pete's sakes. This is a guy that got arrested, marching in like Selma and shit like this. I mean, you would think he's literally the dream of the liberal left. And then maybe that's my point, is the left isn't liberal anymore. I don't know what it is. And here, just watching someone like Brett, him and his wife, Heather, I can't pronounce her last name. These are people on the left that are struggling with this. It's like, they're, again, I talked about them in my last kind of cast. How many people on the left just were like, wait a minute, women came out to vote for Trump in greater numbers than they ever have before? Blacks, Asians, Latinos, and now the Democratic Party is sitting around going, wait a minute, we got to figure out a way to get the guys back. What the hell? So, I don't know what the problem is. Let's go ahead and listen a little bit more.
Needs to go. It won't go. I guess I'm open to the possibility that something historically surprising is going to happen here and should.
Yeah. What do you see? Do you think? I mean, it's also interesting and surprising, in my opinion, that there is a lot of navel gazing within the left of center circles about what are the Democrats going to do next, and the media is kind of airing these grievances instead of focusing on Trump sucks and blah blah blah. There is an understanding that they've taken a huge detour. Something's not working. There's a disconnect. How do we fix this? And this is the first time in decades, in my experience, where there, maybe since the Bush years when he was doing well in the first term, where there is this concept of like, okay, the Democrats don't have their shit together. The media is very loath to talk about this with any sort of openness. And then the fact that they are now, where they do have historically record seats for minority party, which is kind of contradiction, but it's important to say, I think is really. Why do you think that is?
Well, so if I had to guess why we're having the discussion, including the mainstream, I would guess that they are engaged in what is called chilling out the mark.
Okay.
So in a con, like a long con, there comes a point at which the mark might get suspicious.
Right.
And so there has to be some sort of a cathartic confrontation. Oh, here's why that thing that caught your attention happened. And, yes, it does. There was somebody bad in the organization and we've gotten rid of them, or whatever it is. Some pressure release is used to bring the mark back under the spell.
Now, when you have a lifelong liberal Democrat referring to the Democratic Party using a long con to con their people, and I get my mind around that, and that's pretty amazing statement to make from someone and he's still a liberal guy. Don't get me wrong. It's not that he's not ever going to be left-leaning in his political views and kind of progressive ideals. I respect the guy for that. But he's washed his hands of the Democratic Party for the things that it's done. And a lot of this started out as a COVID discretion. But anyway, let's go on.
And my guess is the Democratic Party played such an absurd game since the beginning of the Biden administration, since Biden's election, where they pretended that a senile man wasn't. And then at the point that he was forced out because we figured out that we convinced enough of the electorate that he was senile, that he was not a plausible element for supporting the narrative, they brought in somebody equally absurd for different reasons. And I think Goliath is struggling to learn the lesson of the social media and podcast era.
Yeah.
And the Goliath is so used to being able to tell you what's true, and there being no alternative, right? You can live on the fringe and disregard it, but you can't persuade anybody. But our ability to hash this stuff out in front of people and for reality to win out because it's just simply stronger is not something the narrative engine is used to. And so I think it is struggling to learn that lesson. It is finally beginning to learn it. And so what do you do at the point that you left a senile man in office You ruled by cabal and autopen,
Yeah.
and then you attempted to swap in an empty shirt
Right.
for the senile person, and people have, by whatever mechanism, figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what you need to do is come clean enough.
Yeah. Right. Right. Like Jake
Right.
Tapper, right, with his book. Yep.
Right. And so there's somewhere a PowerPoint presentation in which this entity talks to itself and it
Yep.
says,
Yep.
look, we don't want to admit any more than we have to,
Right. Yep.
but it's not going to be an insignificant admission. It has.
Man, that's I appreciate, and this is why I probably love, and I've always been kind of addicted. I was an early adopter of the kind of podcast stuff. Is well, one certainly as I hope to grow this thing, I want to be able to have conversations with the chat. Is I want to hear what people think. I've got friends all over the United States, one end of the coast to the other, abroad. Um, got a dear friend in Greece, and I have another one on the island of Sicily. Uh, and getting to hear kind of the opinions of other folks of, okay, now this guy's a well-known intellectual. He does the Dark Horse podcast. Um, he's on another order of level of people that I'm never really going to get to talk to on the podcast. But at the same time, when I'm watching people that are clearly having kind of struggles coming to grips with, God, we got conned, man. And here's the weird thing is I'm actually starting to see the same sort of thing happen on the right. We'll go back and kind of scroll through like my Twitter feed just for giggles. But because of, and I still stand by this, I think the MAGA movement is not as far right as people on the left think it is. Again, Donald Trump was a lifelong New York Democrat. Tulsi, Democrat. RFK, Democrat. The fact that Trump's kind of opened the tent over there to it hasn't made some of the far right people very happy. Going through some of those comments on Glenn Greenwald, with his risque stuff getting exposed out there, and the attacks of like the religious right are just brutal, man. And some of it's just disgusting. It really is. Um, I don't get it. I don't fully understand it, but it's the same thing. There's this like strange cancel culture, this kind of tribalism that has taken root, and it's everybody's focused on it for years on the left because it is a real thing. I think even most honest brokers on the left can kind of point out and say, a lot of it went too far. Growing up as a kid, as I mentioned about what I thought Republicans were, probably naively, in the same shoe, I always thought that of the Democratic Party was mostly like labor. Always had the unions behind them. They were like the working man's kind of. They were the blue collar party. I always thought it was kind of a good idea that there was a balance. You had progressive people who come up with new ideas, and then conservatives were always there to go, I don't know about that. Maybe. We'll see. Let's test it on a small scale and see if it works before we roll this out to the whole country kind of a thing. So I always thought there was kind of a reasonable balance there. And politics weren't as, I don't know, just there's so much angst in folks. So I know a lot of people on the right, they watch this and they're just like, they're cheering for the fact of the Democrats are just in a really bad spot right now. I don't see, well, the midterm elections are going to be kind of a big deal because it's not going to focus on one person running for president. Instead, it's all those little elections that take place, Congress critters and senators and, your local city councilmen and shit like that. And I suspect there's going to be a little bit of backlash, I think, to kind of the Trump populist narrative out there. I think there's going to be a lot of people are going, well, Trump was better than Biden, but is there anything better out there? And as he just mentioned just a minute ago, they're finally navel gazing. They're like, where do we go wrong? Where do we fuck this up, man? How did it get so bad? What's his name? Axelrod, the guy that ran Obama election campaign. He's out there going, look, right now in 2024, nobody on the Democratic Party could win that. Now, he can say that now. He didn't say it when it was going to happen. He's got to root for his team and whatnot, but it was pretty clear to everybody. There's this populist movement, and I think a lot of this is born into what we've been talking about here. A lot of it is economics. When working class stiffs, the clerk down at the Walmart or the dollar store, or the people that are working in a call center or slinging auto parts, when your average folks are out there and they're struggling to make rent or a house payment or a car payment, you look at a new house and let's go ahead and Google that. Let's just have a little bit of fun real quick. Let's take a detour and let's go share this right now. And what is average home price in the United States, in the U.S.? Hang on a minute. Let me go ahead and change this to... I got to adjust my stream here so that it'll fit everything. There we go. Yeah. Okay. I'll just go ahead and move me over here for now. Seems to be a little less obtrusive. How about that? Have to bear with me, folks. I'm a boomer, okay? Well, not really. Almost boomer. So, dealing with new software. No. Average home price in the U.S. How about we do, what is it? Median. $20.25. We'll get the... Okay, well, this is actually taking us back to... Which article is that? Is that the Redfin one? It is. So let's go ahead and check this out. Nearly all the 500. Somewhere around here is the median price. Let's go ahead and do a Control F and say... Okay, the median home sale price rose 1.6. Holy shit. $431,931. Now keep in mind, not only is that just shy of $500,000, a 30-year fixed rate mortgage is 6.73%. Guess what? Who on God's green earth is buying this shit? Who's got that kind of money? I don't know. Because Lord knows I certainly don't. My God. Absolutely brutal. Absolutely brutal. All right, let's go step back.
And here's what it's going to be, right? Yes, the president was much farther gone than we admitted. Yes, many people knew. Yes, there was egregious, self-dealing in the Biden family, right? But we're not going to admit the degree of calculation over, wars, COVID vaccines, any of these things. And we're going to come up with a fresh new face. It's going to be like an Obama moment, right?
Yeah.
They're going to come up somebody who's really compelling, and there's some twist about why they're marvelous, and the fresh new face of the Democratic Party
Holy
is going
shit.
to, right?
I'm sorry. I love talking to you because it's very rare where I ask someone a question and they have such a good answer that I'm like, the fucker nailed it. But sorry for my French, but
Well,
you
thank you.
absolutely nailed it. And I did
Yeah.
not have an answer. That is my answer, what you're saying.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I fear this, and this is going to become a race between that rebranding effort and our ability to unspin what they're doing fast enough so people don't get brought back under the spell.
This happened.
There we go. So, curious to what folks kind of feel about that, especially if you're on the left. Is it simply a rebranding thing? I mean, we're watching Jake Tapper go out there. This guy just makes me sick. He really does. He was one of the worst people out there that anybody that mentioned, hey, Biden's looking a little shaky, man. Oh no, they even had a term for the conspiracy theory. It was called a cheap fake. It wasn't necessarily that what you were seeing is necessarily wrong. It's how you were spinning it was wrong. And this guy was literally the pit bull out there going, man, no, don't believe your lying eyes. No, Biden's fine. Remember, was it Jean Pierre or Jen Psaki that came out there, the press secretary? He's like, he's the fittest I've ever been. I can't keep up with him. And you're lied to. And it's like, you're being lied to. And now one of the guys that actually was perpetrating this lie and running this bullshit, he's out there going to sell books for millions of dollars, talking about how he uncovered how Biden was unfit for office. Give me a break, man. Go to hell. Who are you? If that's the case, I need to write a book back about how the Iraq War was a fraud, man. I got literally ostracized on places like, what the hell was the forum? I was a political moderator then. Jeez, that was, oh God, I can't even remember the name of the forums now. But I was one of the 3 moderators in the political forum, and I came out there and said, this just smells like bullshit, man. It's like, okay, where's the weapons of mass destruction? There weren't any. You listen to the memos going back and forth from the neocon kind of warhawk people, and you realize it was all bullshit. And here's another thing. Now, this is 2002, 2003. Every liberal, every Democrat, and even small number of Republicans were out there protesting. I mean, think about the 2006 midterm elections. That was an absolute repudiation of George Bush Jr. And they voted in Democrats to, guess what, under Nancy Pelosi, to be able to stop the spending so George Bush couldn't continue the war. That's how anti-war America was. And this is one of the things that propelled Obama. He got up there starting out, no, end the wars. He gets in office, and it's like, well, we're going to take most of the people back, but we're just going to bomb all those brown-skinned people half a world away with drones instead. Wedding parties, started assassinating American citizens living abroad. And all of a sudden, the left, the whole anti-war party on the left, just put their anti-war signs in the back trunk of their Volvos and went home, and then took up the mantle of what? Racism, misogyny, Me Too, and kind of all the kind of crap that has led the Democratic Party to where it is now. It's in ashes. And again, I'm not going to so much pick on these people, but I'm watching the Republicans going to do the same thing. Politics, when you've been alive as long as I have, you've watched this shit swing back and forth. I've had some folks that kind of poke fun of me. One of my former bosses, my last company, let's just say Kevin Guy, kind of laughed or whatever when I mentioned that I was moderate. I even had someone in chat say something, you a moderate? And I'm thinking, well, if I don't classify myself politically because I don't like to box myself in. I don't know what I am. There's some stuff I'm libertarian on, some stuff I'm a little more right on, some stuff I'm actually kind of left on. I would probably put myself closer to a category of the 1998, or excuse me, the 1988 Bill Clinton, kind of the second term of Bill Clinton. He was a Democrat, but he was locking people up and ending welfare and deporting people, and it was like, holy shit. You go back and look at Clinton's presidency. Uh, he could run as a Republican today, man. He'd be to the right of Trump. That's what cracks me up. Hear people just go absolutely batshit over Trump, and I'm like, dude, you realize he's in a lot of ways to the left of Clinton. Don't take my word for it. Just go back and look at some of the stuff he actually legislated on. But anyway, just for giggles, and I'm open to taking any questions folks may have, but I'm just going to go out here and take an examination. What's going on Twitter today? This is the only social media, I guess, if you want to call it social media. I don't really know if a person. And by the way, I'm having some Tennessee tea today. Bear with me. Let's get back to. Let me see if I can't now move myself back over here. There we go. Get out of the way of the screen. Chet pulled up. So let's have a little bit of fun. Yes, I do look at some memes. I also look at people that got a lot of pictures of landscapes and flowers and stuff. So I got to keep it a little bit light. And Rick Rule, I probably should start actually coming out here and throwing links to some of these folks out there. I think some of the people that I talk to or I chat with, there might be a handful of these people they would find interesting, although not everybody's really into Twitter because the hatred of Elon Musk is still off the charts, which is hilarious. Electric cars are everything. Elon Musk goes to work for Trump. Oh no, electric cars bad. Trump Elon. Anyway, let's not pay any attention to Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post and Amazon, and how he treats his employees. Okay, I ain't gonna lie. That looks like a ham steak. Looks pretty damn good to me. I'm down. Here's another interesting person, Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks. Now here's an amazing woman that's made kind of a pretty wild shift. That's kind of left the echo chamber of, I don't know what I can call where Democrats went. It's hard to describe. These are not liberal people. The liberal people kind of are starting to abandon the party. At least it seems that way to me. Feel free to argue. I mean, come on, Anna Kasparian. This is literally the left's darling. I mean, the Young Turks, her and Cenk Uygur. These were literally some of the earliest podcasters on the left. They had a huge following. And Anna just got tired of, wait a minute, we're saying that men can be women just because they say it. And, she's kind of a little bit along the lines of J.K. Rowling. She's like, no, women have women's spaces. There's women's sports for a reason. And this is what they would call a TERF. This is a thing that I've learned in the past few years. TERF is a trans exclusionary feminist. Or trans exclusionary radical feminist. That's what it is, a TERF. And yeah, so she's basically one of those women that says, oh God, I can't remember her name over in the UK. She wore a shirt that said woman biological female, and damn near got arrested for wearing a shirt that said biological female on it. How nuts is that, man? But look where she's come from. Again, Glenn Greenwald's certainly on the left. He has consensual sex with another adult. I agree. I think a lot of the stuff that's coming at these attacks against Glenn Greenwald are a distraction for, war crimes and atrocities and the slaughter that Israel is engaging in. And just so you folks know, I do not support Hamas, but I don't support Israel either. I don't wish it any harm. I guess I'm pro-American first. I'm thinking all the money that we do send over there and the arms and the bombs and the political support and the UN and things like this, it's not a good thing. You know, most Israelis have a higher standard of living than Americans. I live in Appalachia. Not only do I live in Appalachia, I lived in one of the poorest parts of Appalachia. And it's hard for me to see what my neighbors go through every day when, meanwhile, our tax dollars are going to fund somebody that's trying to expand. Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much, but I think, and keep in mind what's going on in Israel. Pull up Haaretz or the Jerusalem Post. Half the population of Israel is split in either saying, look, we need a two-state solution, stop basically bombing the Palestinians into extinction. And then the other half is just absolutely radical. You know, why would their government be any different than other governments? You look at the United States, look at Germany, France, the UK. Populations are split left and right more now than ever in the world. So anybody that tries to say that, you know, all the Jews in Israel are the same, they've never read an Israeli newspaper, because they criticize themselves way harder than ever I would be allowed to. Hell, I get kicked off the internet forever. Again, I hate war, and I hate the slaughter of people that are just unnecessary. I think there's just always a better way. I look forward to the day that maybe that, you know, Michael Malice and Brett Weinstein were talking about that, you know, maybe Democrats and more traditional liberal people will fight for the party back to something more like it used to be. People that were progressing new ideas that would benefit all of society, not just anybody but white folks. Unusual Whales, another good one to actually follow. These, you'll notice a lot of the things that I do tend to follow, a lot of it's financial. Because again, at my age, one thing that I've learned is when it comes down to politics, there's the old saying, it's the economy, stupid. And when the economy gets bad for a prolonged period of time and it gets tougher and tougher and the disparity between the haves and have-nots get bigger, then you start seeing people like Trump pop up. And if you think Trump's bad, you haven't seen nothing yet. You don't know what could be waiting around the corner. Could get far worse. Same thing going back to the whole Russia bit. We look at this particular topic that was taking place. One of the things that I hear constantly is people wanting to get rid of Putin. Let me see his name. Hang on. Let me go Google this real quick. Medvedev. He is no. Russia Medvedev. Okay. I'm trying to think of what is Medvedev's. Lavrov, which is like kind of his press secretary guy. He's like spokesman for Russia. He's probably one of the slyest characters out there. I enjoy listening to him. He's a no nonsense, no bullshit kind of person. But I will tell you this, one person that does scare the absolute shit out of me what's his name? Dmitry Vedev? Putin, where is it? Medvedev. I'm trying to think of his first name. Yeah, Dmitry. Let's go take a quick look over on Twitter. There he is. Now, this is a guy, if anything were to happen to Putin, he's likely to be the next president of Russia. And if you look at some of the shit he's said, here, this map right there clearly illustrates where his thinking is. Buffer zone. That's it. Everything in red. What's actually left of Ukraine that isn't? That little blue slice. This is what people don't understand. Everybody bitch about Putin. Putin this, Putin that. I'm not saying Putin's a good guy. Don't get me wrong. Not at all. You know what's waiting in the wind? Something far, far worse. And it's not just Dmitry Medvedev. There's a cabal of people that are around him. If I've only started really following kind of Russian politics just because 2022, just because of the Ukraine war. There's a huge streak of these people that are, I'm not going to say that they're nuts, but I'm going to say they're like, okay, maybe a little nuts. They're extremely nationalistic, and all I'm basically saying is the American people should be happy they got Putin. You have no idea how bad it could get, because there's some people out there that would have already been talking about, all right, it's time to go hit NATO, pull out the nukes, get ready, go to DEFCON 3. We're not putting up with this shit at all. So I think it would be prudent if people paid a little bit closer attention to these things. Again, this is one of the things I am critical of Trump over is I wish he had better people in foreign policy. I got nothing against Pete Hegseth, but is he the right person to kind of, be in the position he is? I don't think so. I just don't think so. Another person I would recommend folks to follow is Walter Kern. This guy is an absolute gem. I don't know if I know there's a small number of you people out there left in the world that still read. I absolutely adore him. He does a frequent podcast with Matt Taibbi, another amazing journalist, but he's old school kind of gonzo journalist. No nonsense, kind of Midwest. It's an absolute joy reading his stuff, and he's a little bit of a boomer kind of a thing, but I miss that kind of journalism of the past. It's not quite Walter Cronkite. It's more Hunter Thompson. For any of you who even know who Hunter Thompson is, one of my heroes. But he makes some really fascinating observations. What is it about the west coast of America that hates secrecy and something about the east that prizes it? And he just has some really, really, really good observations on the social pulse of what is going on. Again, he follows a lot of the same things I say. Wait a minute. The guy made, hundreds of thousands of dollars covering up what Biden, now he's making millions exposing what he covered up. Any of you younger folks out there that ever been in the gaming world that's played certain games, you know that a very common theme is You create a problem, then you sell the solution. Very common theme amongst game. Certain gaming, what do you call them, developers, whatever. Some are worse than others. Another old curmudgeon that I do read a good bit of is Dave Collum. Certainly, you can see a lot of these folks. You'll if you ever read or watch these folks, all of a sudden you'll notice that there's a lot of you'd be able to see Prestonisms in a lot of the stuff that they kind of convey. No, by the way, when it comes to Rick Rule, even though he's in the mining industry, he's actually kind of a credit analyst dude. Um, he's taught me probably more about investing than any other man out there in a very measured way. Like Dave Smith, libertarian. Not everybody agrees with that. Got some Glenn Deason. Anyway, maybe one of these days I just start sharing a list of reasonable kind of people to follow, but I'd be curious. Anybody got any kind of questions? Anything they want to talk about? Anything they want to hear about? Because mostly I'm just kind of having fun catching up on the news today. Holy shit. They don't ring the bell at the top, but there will be signs. Yeah, you might be a little bit too addicted to trading and stuff if these are your screen set up. Holy shit. That's nuts, man. There you go. Life under Russian occupation, I guess. Oh my God, it's turning into the West. Dude, what are we teaching young women in our country these days? Seriously. It's like they can make more money on OnlyFans if you actually look at like the finances of OnlyFans. It's insane. Uh I guess maybe that's what feminism got you. That's freedom for women. Stand on top of a car and twerk in a little mini skirt and pretend like you're eating out some chick. I guess. Jesus, are you kidding me? Uh, welcome. Wow. But anyway, I guess kind of doing a summation and recap of everything today. Oh, another one of my little hobbies, man. Let's come over here to share this thing. Someone that I watch a good deal of it is I do watch a good bit of Kurt over at Uncivil Law, and there's a woman named Andrea Burkhart. Also, she's California former prosecutor, moved to Nashville, Tennessee. She's a sweet gal. Emily D. Baker. I ain't gonna lie. All right, I've been a little bit captivated, because I ain't working as much as I should, and I've been so wrapped up in the Karen Reed trial. I don't know if any of you guys have watched the whole Karen Reed stuff, but I mean, literally, you can see it's at the top. Even with a lawyer, he's down in Tampa. It's sad how much time you have to spend online to literally know where all these various podcasters and stuff are. What's the latest news? What's the hubbub? My God, I spend so much of my life online now. Another reason probably why I live here in rural Tennessee is I got to step out on the porch sometimes just to escape it. But it's nice to be able to push a button and just get engaged. Again, the Duran, they talk a lot about geopolitics. Definitely worth a watch. It's outside the United States, so it's a. Let me make sure that this is actually how this is presenting. Yeah, okay, you can actually see it. certainly worth a watch. Um, don't rely on just the United States. If anybody that's interested in geopolitics, it's not to say that these people are right, wrong. Go read Russian newspapers, watch Russian media, the limited that you can get. Speaking of, this was something that came up here. In fact, let me go to was it not the Glenn Greenwald, was it? Yes, it was. Um, Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and play a short bit of this. I wasn't aware of this. The early TikTok days, there was an article that was put out by bin Laden explaining why he was mad at the West and why they were going to fly planes into our buildings. And he laid it all out there in an article that, believe it or not, got published in the UK in a newspaper. And people on TikTok started referring to it, going, well, wait a minute. Okay, I can understand that. This was something that I'm trying to think. Ron Paul, back in 2008, during his presidential campaign, stood on stage and everybody just booed and laughed at him. And he says there's a thing called blowback. Our foreign policy is doing certain actions that are going to cause people to hate us, and it's going to come back at us. And if you ever watched the movie Charlie Wilson's War, trying to think of the guy's name, the famous actor that did Castaway, and you know what I'm talking about. He was the head actor in Charlie Wilson's War. In the very last scene of the movie, after they funded the Mujahideen, they drove the Russians out of Afghanistan back in like 1980. And he said all he wanted to do was get $1 million for schools in Afghanistan. And his point was there's 1 million young men, like teenage boys. Most of their fathers have been killed. They got a chip on their shoulder. It would probably be a good idea to go open up a school and keep them moderate, keep them at least apprised of like the American way of life and our culture, our values, things of this nature. And Congress people said, they don't know, $1 million. Nah, screw it. No, they were issuing checks of billions to the CIA to fund a secret war against the Russians in Afghanistan with the Taliban. Well, the Mujahideen back then. And the last scene of the movie was, we did great things and then we fucked it up. And that's blowback. Let's go ahead and hear kind of what Glenn Greenwald has to say on this. Oh, whoop, whoop, whoop. Wait a minute. Bring it back in. Let me make sure I've actually got this pulled up. Nope, I don't. Hold on. Boomer moment. Share this instead. All right, let's try that again. Let's come back a couple minutes.
In the middle of all that, a bunch of young people, or Japan, or South Korea, or Norway, and bin Laden was explaining why there's so many Muslims in that region who hate the United States, but the United States government didn't want anyone to hear it. 20 years later, while October 7th happened and we're supporting this ethnic cleansing, and I would call it now a genocide as well, in Gaza. That's what most genocidal experts, including Israelis and Jewish ones, call it. And it's hard to say anything else, but whatever. In the middle of all that, a bunch of young people who were told the history of 9/11 that the U.S. government wanted everyone to believe discovered the bin Laden letter because it was on the Guardian's website. Because the Guardian's a British newspaper. It was not no American news outlet, despite its historical importance. And they started passing it around on TikTok and saying, oh, wow, I never knew any of this. I never understood that one of the reasons why these people attacked us was because we are so monomaniacally devoted to Israel, and why that we're constantly interfering in that region, bombing them, sanctions, overthrowing their government, overthrowing their leaders. Of course, people are going to get angry at us and want to attack back. And the minute that letter started to become well read by the American people who were, primarily younger, the US government went ballistic and demanded that TikTok ban it. The Guardian, a news outlet, immediately took the letter off their website so nobody could read it any longer. All those links that people were posting on TikTok to go read that letter would no longer work. And then TikTok, immediately under pressure from the US government, which was obviously already threatening to close TikTok and ban it from the United States anyway, started banning all the hashtags, Bin Laden letter. You could not anymore read or find. I mean, this is like the stuff we're taught that the Soviets did, right? Like hiding letters, hiding documents, erasing history. And I continued to be shocked by that event, that everybody thought that was fine. To take a letter that is of great historical importance,
Yes.
from the person that is alleged to have been responsible for the single worst attack on American soil, maybe on par with Pearl Harbor, but in terms of like a single day casualty count, explaining from his perspective why he did it. Like, you want to hear from your enemy, right? Like, you want to understand like what they're
I
claiming.
want all relevant information, and I'll decide.
Yeah,
what it
yeah,
means.
yeah. You don't want people deciding for you what you can and can't read.
Yeah.
They were petrified that young Americans were going to hear the reasons proffered, and they made that letter disappear.
Why would the Guardian, which is supposedly like this left-wing British publication, like why would they go along with that?
The Guardian is very, supportive of the Western establishment.
Yeah, and that's all we need to know. That's exactly it. I had a conversation the other day with a childhood friend of mine. I mentioned it the other day in my podcast. He kind of feels that the lack of trust in our institutions there's like I don't even want to call a plot behind it, or there's something behind it. This is not an organic thing. It's intended. And for whatever reasons. Now, he's a little bit more on the left, so maybe I'm assuming he's thinking it's for reasons for people on the right. I don't know, and it's not really that important. But when I look over this, and I look over the course of my lifetime, I'm pushing 6 decades. Won't be too long. Been around a good while. One thing that is, why am I pessimistic? I've experienced a lot of a decline of faith of institutions. I didn't start out that way. Quite the contrary. Yeah, sure, I've had kind of a streak of anti-establishment in me ever since the 5th grade, when I was getting paddled on a daily basis for not doing homework. But yeah, if you're listening, Mr. Yoder, I remember you, brother. But I want to believe that our government is a functional thing that's doing the best for the citizens of the country. And I read that thing the other day. What is basically, what is the purpose of government? It's literally to kind of ensure the safety, security, and the prosperity of its people. But that's not where we're at today. And he would point out to me that he thinks there's more people with better intentions than we give credit for. I disagree. When I consider how many people that are availed in our government, how many of them are so concerned with just my well-being or your well-being? And it's not just government, it's finance. We look at businesses. Businesses look at me like I'm some kind of a I mean, think about it. Why do you get a free email on Google or Yahoo or anywhere else? It's because they're tapping your data. They just want to know your shopping habits. If you were ever offered anything free online, that's because you are now the product. You are being data mined for whatever purposes, to sell you, pipe tobacco or shaving kit or whatever the hell it is, gardening tools. Um, Most of us accept that. It's like, okay, I'll sign up for a free Google account and I'll allow them to check out my metadata. What am I looking at on Amazon and stuff like that? Um, we've come to just kind of accept that. And it's like, okay, well, when's the last time business did anything altruistic that wasn't just simply profit motive to exploit people? I'm trying to think of any kind of business institution that's kind of designed or geared towards the benefit of people generally, working class people. If you go to work for someplace like Verizon or Walmart, Amazon, hell, even Wrench, do you think those people have any of your interest in mind? Do you think that they do any kind of business decisions thinking, how can I help this out? How can I build a better company, have better employees? How can I improve society? How can I improve my workforce? Or how can I do any of these things? And then they're enter the equation, man. You're expendable. You're a barcode, man, to be scanned. Uh, Politics. I listen to people like who was the one? I got some friends that are really crazy about this girl, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Uh, she says some really kooky shit, man. I ain't gonna lie. Some of that stuff makes me roll my eyes. But on other hands, she's kind of certain ways a darling of certain people on the right. And yet, look at her financial statements. And these people are taking so much advantage of insider trading. So, okay, let's go look at finance. Do you think the stock market is about investing your money long term into a company that you think is going to make it good and they have a good business? Do you think anybody gives a shit about that? They go through a stock picker on anything from Fidelity to Trading View, and you're looking to make the best amount of money. And we're going to go leverage money. We're going to go gamble. That's what it is, casino. So, I mean, I look at politics, and okay, well, what's a safe space? Science. We look what happened with COVID. Man, dude, that's kind of ugly. Government shut us down, and all of a sudden, you you listen to academic institutions that all of a sudden became less sciency and more authoritarian. They were just like toting a line. You look at some of the stuff. Go look at that, and I'll post a link to it, to that conversation between Michael Malice and Eric Weinstein. Another interesting thing about the mRNA viruses, or the mRNA vaccines, it's not a vaccine. It is technically a gene therapy. Um, Nowhere in the science, even from its initial conception, was it ever designed as vaccination. Now, it can do things that would mimic a vaccination, but that wasn't ever its intent. Um, there's a lot of things that our science have come out there. Neil Tyson DeGrasse or whatever. What a joke that guy is. He made a mockery out of it. Please, somebody go resurrect Carl Sagan. Bring me back some old school people. So it's like thing after thing after thing. Uh, we look where AI technology is going to displace people. We look where social media went. Well, there's another one of those corporate money grabs. How can we get kids addicted to the algorithm? We give them pluses and likes. We'll study them physiologically and psychologically, and we'll devise ways to be able to tap into it to make them literally a money sink. How can we extract as much money out of them or their parents through them as we can. Who gives a shit about how it does with their mental state? What about these young girls? We look through the Twitter thing. Why are all these young girls out there just, what do they want to do? They want to be an influencer, want a pair of leotards or a short skirt dress, or go have sex for, Pornhub, because they might, or OnlyFans. What have we done to people? We've commoditized everything, even things like dating and marriage and things like traditional kind of bulwarks of whatever. Everything's become kind of transactional and commodified. That's a damn shame. So yes, it's part of why I'm maybe a bit pessimistic. I would love it if any of you people would out there could tell me what it is that I have to be optimistic about. I'll give anybody a moment. Tell me what it is. What's the good thing that I should be looking for? Where's the hope? And was it the hope and change? I think that was the Obama presidency, the campaign slogan, hope and change. Let's go ahead and use Trump's things. Make America great again. Okay. I've got no problem with that. I mean, I still think America's great. I don't think it like totally went to shit, but I think the world's going to shit. It's not simply the United States. The United States is just a high profile example because so many people spend so much time online. I mean, we literally live here. But anyway, so we kind of had to walk through just some interesting stuff out there. Some of the news of the day. I can't think of anything really big that's coming up other than the Glenn Greenwald stuff. What does James O'Keefe have to say about this? Okay, wow, James O'Keefe coming out. And just so you know, you can see there's people on the right that really just, they're coming down hard on the whole Trump and MAGA stuff. Elon Musk leaves the job of making government more efficient for sending people to humans to Mars because it's easier. There you go. It's, I don't know, kind of funny. But anyway, folks, that's about all I have for today. Let me get back up here. So again, for the handful of small people that tuned in, showed up for chat today, I do thank you for that. Be sure to like, subscribe, buy a coffee, need equipment, pay for the software. And again, I'm looking forward in the future to doing more just off the cup news of the day. I would certainly like to be able to engage with the audience a lot more. I want to hear what other people are out there saying. I listen to wealthy, high standing people, if you will, every day. It's just a consumption of stuff that I got to do to kind of stay on top of everything. And while I certainly value a lot of their opinions and stuff, especially when they kind of match my own, I always love it when they agree with me. But I'd like to know what folks are hearing. And please, don't be bashful. Go ahead, throw the stuff in chat. It's the only way I get to know. It improves the algorithm. And again, part of the reason that I kind of wanted to kind of do this is to get a pulse on where the average people are. It's one thing to hear an academic or somebody famous or a celeb or somebody talk about what they think about politics. Yeah, okay, that's fine. But sometimes I would rather hear, what does the clerk down at the dollar store think? Or what does the checkout guy or the butcher down at the Save-A-Lot? What are their experiences like? Because you know what? They're equally valid. And it's part of the reason we get people like Trump, and why populism shows up on our screen is because people's voices aren't being heard, they're not being addressed. There's issues with regular working people that are trying to make a living, man. This isn't brain surgery. And I would think that most average people, they're not out there to get rich. I mean, would they be happy to? Sure. I think most people just want to be content. They don't want to have to live hand to mouth. They just want to raise babies and have a clean home and go out on the weekends, have a picnic with their families and stuff, and just live the American dream kind of a thing. So anyway, tell me what you think. Be sure to drop a comment. I thank you guys for those of you who showed up today, and I look forward to doing this again. I'd actually rather do this again, probably a little bit shorter time, depending on the engagement that I get of other people. But anyway, peace, love, and chicken grease. Thanks for showing up. Thank you for showing up, Roots and Reason. Again, like, subscribe, buy me a coffee.